All right. I'm a believer. Do you believe? I believe in God. I'm a believer. Whether I'm in the choir or not, I'm a believer. I believe in God. Do you believe? Sometimes I think we forget that the hardest thing to do is stand up here and do something new. And they stood up here and they sang it a little tentatively, but they sang it. And sometimes I think we take for granted that that's easy to do when we get up here. And I just wanted to encourage them. Because some of y'all weren't standing out front and you still didn't sing. Still didn't sing. Yeah, you were hiding back there and still didn't sing. We didn't ask you if you had a good voice. We just asked you to sing. And so I'm thankful. Thank y'all for what you did this morning. Thank you for coming and celebrating. Let's celebrate our young folk. God doesn't ask us to be perfect. He just asks us to show up. That's all. Just show up. If we show up, he'll give us what we need to do what we need to do. There's one important announcement I needed to make in terms of our sick. They're not shut in, but they're sick. Needed to be in prayer for Deacon Derek Maddox. Many of you may know, some of you may not know, that Derek is very driven. He's got 2 restaurants that he's trying to run right now, one in Tuscaloosa, one in Birmingham, but this week he had serious health problem with some bad kidney stones. They laid him down, too, for a few days. So we're trying to open a new restaurant and trying to do that. It's according to his wife, he was in severe pain. But somehow he drove himself to the emergency room. The fact that he did that tells you he was struggling because Derek wouldn't have done that. So pray for Derek. And he's supposed to have a procedure tomorrow. Hopefully it will alleviate the problem. But pray for him, please. And pray for him that he'll have the support he needs as he goes through this endeavor. Didn't want to forget that. Started a sermon series on last week entitled Fake News. Fake news. That's not in the Bible. That's not in the Bible. And we started out with the message entitled God won't give you more than you can bear. That's what people say all the time when things happen. And we came to you to explain that that's not in the Bible and it's not even biblical, because God absolutely will give you more than you can bear. And the reason he allows more than you can bear to come into your life is so you can stop being dependent on yourself. And so you can be dependent on him. And sometimes it's only those trials, sometimes it's only pain that makes you turn away from your own ability and turn to the Lord. And so today, I want to try to continue in that vein, and continue in this sermon topic entitled Fake News. And I want to talk about another topic that we say all the time, another saying we give all the time to people that is simply not true. And I want to try to explain to you why it's not true and see if we can get some edification from the scripture on why we have to stop saying this to people. Today I want to work from the topic, everything happens for a reason. All right? We say that to people all the time. Everything happens for a reason. And I came to tell you that that's not true. All right? That's not biblical. That's not biblical, and when you're trying to comfort someone, please stop telling them that. Because I guarantee you I can bring some people to you who have gone through some excruciating situations, and they've been struggling all their lives to find a reason for it. In fact, that's the hope they have, that they're going to one day find a reason for it. And I came to tell you that they will leave here never finding a reason for what has happened to them. And so the way you make sure you understand that this is not a biblical concept and is not in the Bible anywhere, is probably to understand how it comes to be. And then we talk about what we can do instead of telling people everything happens for a reason. Now, let me say this to you. Just because you've been saying something all your life doesn't mean it's right. Okay? Because I see folk, the look on your face is like, God always got a reason for everything. Yeah, he does. But you exclude one valuable element of what's happening to us, and that's the problem of sin and how sin affects everything we do. All right? Don't leave sin out of the equation when it comes to things happening here on earth. As an underlying scripture to support this message, I want to go to Genesis and talk about a much-loved Bible character and see if his life can give us some foundation and some understanding of why everything happened for a reason isn't true. And it comes from Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. Genesis chapter 50 and verse 20. And if I read it, you'll probably understand who I'm talking about. And maybe you'll understand why he said it, but I'll try to put it into context for you. All right? The writer wrote, Moses wrote, "But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive." Paraphrase it, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. If you're not familiar with the Bible and don't know who's saying that, the character that I'm referring to, the person in the Bible I'm referring to, is a young man named Joseph. Joseph. Let me see if I can explain to you who Joseph is, and then we can do some teaching on this. Joseph, at the time, was the youngest son of Jacob. Jacob had been able to father Joseph with his wife that he desired for 14 years. Her name was Rachel. And so Joseph comes as a much-loved son. But I should tell you this, that Jacob had 10 other sons with another wife named Leah. But Leah wasn't Jacob's first choice. He wasn't. In fact, when he went to their father and said, "I'd like to have Rachel's hand in marriage," y'all remember In the Color Purple? When he said, "I want Nettie," he said, "Nettie you can't have. You flat out can't have her." He said, "But you can have Celie." Well, that's this scene all over again. Except he said, "If you work for me for 7 years, then I'll let you have Rachel." And Jacob said, "Okay, I'll do it." At the end of that 7 years, his father-in-law pulled the okie doke and said, "You got to work 7 more years." And Jacob said, "Okay." And at the end, he said that the time that went by, we talk about this in weddings all the time. This is how much he loved her. The time that went by seemed as but a day because of his great love for her. So they finally got together. They're finally together. And they have a son. His name is Joseph. And you can imagine that Joseph was spoiled. Yeah, he was the youngest of all the sons. He was spoiled. And because of him being so spoiled, his daddy wanted to bless him with something. And so he gave him a special coat. And this is what the kids learn about all the time. He gave him a coat, and the coat was made of many colors. And his brothers were hating because they saw all this favoritism being shown to their brother, little brother. To make matters worse, Joseph was misunderstood. I don't want to say he was arrogant, but he just knew he was special. And he knew he was special, and he had the problem of telling folk, I'm special. Now, you can call that arrogance if you want to, but the truth of the matter is Joseph was special. And he told his brothers, I had a dream, and in my dream, ultimately, y'all going to bow down to me. Ooh. He said, I'm going to be your ruler. Oh. That's a problem. You don't tell your big brothers that too often without them getting upset, even though it may be true, even though God may have ordained it. So lo and behold, his brothers got together, and because they disliked their little brother so much, they took him off one day, and they sold him off into slavery. They were going to kill him. But one of the older brothers had compassion on him and could not see having his younger brother's blood on his hand. And so he convinced them, instead of killing him, to first throw him down in a well. Then they didn't want to leave him in the well, so a traveling band of merchants came by, and they sold him into the traveling band of merchants. And he went off basically into slavery. This is their little brother now. This is Joseph, their little brother. But while he was in slavery, his personality still blossomed. See, he never stopped being radiant. He was special. He kept a good attitude even in slavery. And so when he gets into slavery, he ends up working for the slave folk. And they find that he's valuable. Well, something happens, and he ends up getting sold into a man named Potiphar's house. And he goes to Potiphar, and guess what? Because he's got a good attitude, his attitude blossoms, and he ends up being the head of all of Potiphar's servants. This is Joseph. This is Jacob's favorite little boy. He's the head of all of Potiphar's servants. He's running the house when Mr. Potiphar is away. He's there all day with Miss Potiphar. Uh-oh. He's young. He's attractive. He's strapping. And she knows it. And he becomes the first man in the Bible in the Me Too movement. All right? He does, because she starts trying to have him have relations with her. But he's good and he's upstanding, and he refuses to do it. And because of that, she uses her position of power to lie on him. And the law said at the time he should have been killed once she brought that allegation. But because Mr. Potiphar knew his wife, and because he liked Joseph so much, he convinced the rulers to put him in jail and not to kill him. This is the truth now. This is the Bible. And when he went to jail, his attitude flourished. He still got a positive attitude. He had the gift of interpreting dreams, and while he's in there, he interprets the dreams of Pharaoh's chief servants, his cook and his baker. Tells them what's going to happen in their dreams. And guess what, y'all? Because he's got the gift, it came true. They end up getting out of prison, and he says, when you get out, don't forget me. So they go back to the palace and start working, and lo and behold, Pharaoh starts having bad dreams. And they said he talked to all of his magicians, all his soothsayers. They couldn't tell him what his dreams meant. And the baker remembered, there's this boy in jail named Joseph who had a real good attitude. Sire, I believe he can interpret your dream. So they went and got Joseph out of jail. Joseph ends up interpreting the Pharaoh's dream, and it comes true. And Pharaoh makes Joseph, the little boy who had a positive attitude, but who made his big brothers mad, the little boy who was sold off into slavery, the little boy who was chased by his master's wife because he wouldn't sleep with her, the little boy who had been in prison is now the number 2 person, second only to Pharaoh in Egypt. All because he had a good attitude, all because he never changed his mind about who he was going to serve, and that was the God of Israel. Joseph is now number 2 and running all of Egypt. My goodness. He'll keep you if you allow him to. So the question is, why did he have to go to jail? Why did he have to get sold into slavery? Is there a reason for that? And the answer is absolutely, because his brothers were evil. Because his brothers were low down. Because Miss Potiphar was wrong. Because Miss Potiphar was evil. That's why he went in. God didn't make him go into slavery. God didn't put him in jail. God didn't put him in all those situations. The evil of man put him in those situations. But God can take what the evil of man does and do it in your benefit. How many of y'all have ever gone and done this while you were out? I know all the kids have done it. There's a drink we'll make when a lot of times we're bored. Sometimes they think they like it now. They call it a suicide. That means on the fountain drink dispenser, they go and they put a little bit of every flavor in the drink cup. And then they go back and drink it. Lemonade and root beer and Coke and orange and punch and everything. All in one drink. We call it a suicide. I don't know what they call it now. Tutti Frutti. Tutti Frutti in there. Okay, Tutti Frutti from Texas, all right. At any rate, there's no way all of that is supposed to work good together. Somehow, it tastes all right. All right, if you can take it. Well, that's how God does. God takes your root beer and your orange, and he takes your Coke, and he takes your blueberry and your cherry, and God takes your lemonade, all that you have mixed together, some by accident, some on purpose. And he can take all of that, and Romans 8:28 says that he can work it all together for your good. Even though some of it you may not have intended to do, even though you're trying to make an Arnold Palmer with some root beer and some other things, he can put it all together and make it taste good. That's how he does life. But God doesn't give it to you all mixed up like that. You do the mixing yourself. You do the choosing yourself. The bad things in life happen not because God orchestrates it, but because of our sin, because of what you and I do, in fact, because of our choices. How many of you are completely satisfied with all the choices you've made about your life right now? Raise your hand. How many of you will agree that you made some bad choices in your life? Yeah, every one of us will say we made some bad choices. How many of you think God made that choice for you? But how many of you have been so grateful because you've learned that even though I made bad choices for myself, God was able to take my bad choice and flip it upside down and make it a good choice? See, this is what happened. If you say that everything happens for a reason, then you say that God controls every aspect of everything, and that eliminates you having any choice. And the one thing God has given us is free will. He's given us choice, which is why even though there's bad and evil in the world, God doesn't cause evil to come upon us. Man causes evil to come upon us. We would say, when we say everything happens for a reason, then we say there are no accidents. That's what we're saying. We would say that some higher power, God or otherwise, is orchestrating every event. That's what we're saying when we make that statement, that God intends for everything to happen that happens. God doesn't intend for babies to get cancer. God doesn't intend for any of us to get cancer. But sin is in the world. Bad things happen in the world. It was never God's intention that we die. It was our choice. that led us to that death. And those choices have continued since that time. So from now on, what about those times when I'm sitting with someone and they're going through a tough time, or I'm going through a tough time? What happens when we're dealing with some disaster or destruction that's come upon somebody's life? Somebody's been abused or neglected. They're struggling with pain or some other issue in their life. What am I to say to them when the phone call comes and somebody we love has been in an accident and it did not have the result we wanted? Or what happens when my kid, who I've tried to do my best to raise in the right way, seems to want to throw his life away and go a completely different way? What am I supposed to say to them when they come to me and they're looking to me for comfort? Well, I'm asking you, do not lie to them. Do not simply give them this blanket answer, everything happens for a reason. Because they will put a hook in that statement and spend the rest of their lives trying to figure out what that reason is. And the fact of the matter is, church, they'll never find, maybe not on this side of heaven, the reason why those things happen. I can't tell you what's going to happen on the other side, whether God will reveal all those things. I can't even tell you that it's going to be important on the other side for God to reveal those things. But I can tell you that there's some folk who wring their hands daily trying to understand and figure out what God is doing by allowing that pain and suffering to come into their lives. So the first thing I want to tell you is, don't say everything happens for a reason, all right? One thing you can do is just agree with them how tough it is right now. Agree with them. This is a tough struggle. This is awful. Make no bones about it. I'm not going to belittle what you're going through right now. I'm not going to minimize it. The next thing you can do is remind them, since you're a believer, that God loves them. That even though I'm in the midst of this struggle right now, God, in fact, loves me. You can also tell them, validate, that it was not God who put them through what they're going through, because they're looking for a reason. And in fact, many times we're looking for somebody to blame. And so instead of drawing them closer to God, we end up driving them away from God, because people say, what kind of God would let me go through, would put me through this? Tell them it wasn't God's desire, because his heart is breaking right now. Seeing you struggle this way is breaking God's heart. And you can also assure them of God's promise that even though it's bad, look at this now, that he can take bad and turn it into good. But you got to remind them of those things. John 10:10 says that the thief has one job. The thief is the enemy, Cam. He comes, he's got one job. His job is to steal and kill. It's negative. It's always destruction, always tearing down. But Jesus Christ said, but I have come that they, that's us, those who believe on him, might have life, and that we might have not just life, Regina, but we might have more abundant life. So my purpose is, Jesus said, is completely opposite to the purpose of the enemy. He comes to bring negativity, and I only come to bring positivity into your life. God doesn't want calamity, death, or destruction. He wants the opposite. He wants us to know that he loves us. So let's ask this question, because it stands to, can God stop the bad stuff from happening? Absolutely. He can. He can prevent it. His grace is such that he could prevent every single thing from happening. And in fact, you need to be glad right now he does. He does stop bad things from happening. Think about how many more black folk would have gotten killed during the civil rights movement. Think about how many more evil things would have been done at the hand of man during the slave trade. Think about that. But God won't stop every evil thing that every man does. He won't do that. There are consequences to evil. And unfortunately, those consequences sometimes touch our lives. and they make our lives worse than it's got to ever be. But it's not God who's orchestrating that. It's man. Right now, if you say there's a reason for everything, I challenge you to give me the reason for slavery. I challenge you to give me the reason for all those lynchings that happened. Because somebody asked for a raise on a job, they lynched him. Because somebody looked the wrong way when a person of a different color walked past, they lynched him. There's no validating reason for that happening other than the evil intent in man's heart. So yeah, God can stop it, but God didn't create us to be puppets. And thank God for that. What he wants is for you and I to willingly choose to follow him and to obey his lifestyles, to love other people, to care for one another. That's what he wants us to do. And when we do, he validates that love. So free will is important. Romans 8:28 says that God works for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes. And so the last thing I want to tell you is this. The most powerful tool you have is a simple word, choice. Choice. Don't ever take it for granted. You can choose to do things. Nobody made you get up, I don't think, and come here this morning. Maybe if you're a child or a young person, the adult in the house said, we're going to church this morning. All right? But there's going to come a time when you make that choice yourself. And I can tell you, I stand here as a living witness that as soon as I could make that choice myself, I chose otherwise. As soon as I could. And I got to tell you the truth. When somebody stopped making me come, I stopped making myself come. And life started happening. And I realized that I needed some of what was going on in that place. I needed someone to help me manage my life because I wasn't doing a good job. I needed someone to make sure that I had a good foundation in how to treat other people because the people I was around didn't care how they treated everybody else, including me. I needed some guidance like that. And when I looked around, I found that the answer was what I already knew about. It wasn't new out there. I was studying all this New Age stuff, all this philosophy, and none of it fit the bill. And I found out that the same old manager who was managing my granddad's life was available to me. The same one who was managing my mama's life was available to me. And I had walked away from what was the best thing I could ever have. And so I can tell you, after walking away freely, I came back freely. And I'm so grateful, look, that even though bad things happened while I was away from the ark of safety, his grace protected me. Oh, yeah, there were plenty of things I did that in the end I can see endangered my life. Or I could have been gone. I had friends who were gone. I had friends who had died drinking and driving. These are friends that I had been drinking and riding with. They were gone. I had friends who had done things and they're now gone to glory. I hope, pray. But the Lord kept me. And he brought me all the way back. And he put me in a place. He didn't bring me to the pulpit. He brought me to the pews. And I sat in the pews long enough and listened long enough and started praying for myself. Stopped resting on mama's prayers for me and started praying for myself. And I say mama, I mean mama and them. All the folk who were praying for me because it was more than just her. And so I used the most powerful tool I had. It wasn't education. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't name. It wasn't where I was from. The most powerful tool I had, I could have used no matter where I was. And it was choice. Wherever you are, you can choose him. And he will bless you. So, look at this now. Was there a reason that Joseph went through all he went through? One would be hard-pressed to say there was a good reason to be in slavery. No good reason for that. One would be hard-pressed to say that's a good reason to go to prison. Because no matter the circumstances, prison is prison. And can I tell you something? The prisons then were horrible compared to the prisons we have today. And yet, he kept a good attitude while he was in there. Yes, one could say that Joseph came out on the best end of it. And that's the story. Because he chose to continue serving the Lord. Because his choice was always to be a faithful servant. It was Joseph's choice, his choices, that allowed God to bless him through it all. And some of you sitting in here right now have had the same experience. Even though you have had bad things happen to you, you choose to worship, as the songwriter said. You choose to serve him. You choose to follow him. You choose to allow him to be the Lord of your life. And so even though bad comes, God can, his word, use the bad and turn it into good if you allow him to. Same way he's got a plan for everybody sitting in here. Even if things happen that you don't understand, don't blame God for that. But trust God that he'll see you through and he'll give you another way to deal with the circumstances that life gives to you. I've seen so many people struggling with things that would knock other folk out. I mean, take them out for the count. But they choose not to do it. I told you not too long ago that I was in Walmart. I came up and drove to Walmart, and I got out of the car, put my 2 feet on the floor, on the ground, got out, walked in. She was with me. She knows. We walked out, and I looked at the car next to me, and the young lady hopped out of the car. She had no arms. I'm still trying to figure out how she drove to Walmart. And she slung her purse over her shoulder. I still ain't figured that out yet. And she said, "Good morning." And I said, "What's up?" I am curious. She had no arms. She didn't walk to the front of Walmart and get in a cart to drive around in. She went and she got a buggy. And she started pushing the buggy. And I was curious. I had to follow her a little bit. She probably could have filed a stalking charge on me. This would have taken somebody else out. Somebody would have placed them in a home somewhere where somebody would take care of them all day. But clearly, somebody told her, because you have this disability doesn't mean you have an inability to take care of yourself. I told you she drove, didn't I? I don't know. Don't ask me how it happened, but she drove to the place. She was the only one in the car driving. She went in. I saw her getting something off the top shelf. She had her foot reached up on the top shelf to get the item she wanted off. Yeah. And she shopped just like I shop. Now, she can spend all her life blaming God for not being born with arms. She can spend her life doing that. But I can stand here and tell you, clearly she doesn't choose to do that. Clearly she chooses to make as much out of life. Yeah, seems like God gave her suicide in terms of her life. But she made it seem like it's the sweetest dream that she's ever had before in her life. Same thing with Joseph. Seemed like the Lord allowed someone to mix up a whole lot. But I came to tell you today, it came out sweet for him too. Same thing with you. Look, we messed up. God wanted us to live in paradise forever. We messed up and chose not to listen to God. God put us out of paradise. But then he gave us a way to get back in, and all he said was choose Jesus Christ. That's all, just choose him. I can take what was messed up and make it sweeter with Jesus. You just got to choose him to be the Lord of your life. Believe in his sacrificial death and believe in the power of the resurrection he gave him. And if you do that, then life starts to get sweeter because everything with Jesus is sweet. Songwriter said, he's sweet, I know. Yeah. Whenever you get in a space where there's a whole lot of folk who love the Lord, somebody can say there's a sweet, sweet spirit in this place. I came to tell you today, he's ready for you. And so while the young folk come and get ready to sing a song, I'm empowered to invite you to be a part of Jesus Christ's family. Today is the day. Not going to let today go past without me getting in the family of Jesus Christ. Without me making that choice, because choice is the most powerful thing I have. I may not even have a church family that I'm satisfied with right now, but today I'm going to choose a church family. First, I'm going to choose Jesus' family, and then I'm going to choose this church family to be a part of right now. So while they sing, the doors of our church are wide open. Whosoever will, let them come right now.